Many games that were released on the PlayStation during its early lifespan mainly contributed to ports of iconic arcade entries. Many of these games would also be released on earlier systems and even on other platforms that were around at that time with the Sega Saturn. And many of them would prove to be quite popular, that would see you taking on various roles. Many of these games would combine different genres into the mix, with some of them being racing games, would also add in combat elements that you had seen from earlier on iconic arcade entries. So if we take a look at Night Striker, that originally started off life in the arcade in Japan way back in 1989. The game was later ported to the Sega Mega CD in 1993, but it also got later ports on both the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation in both 1995 and 1996, and would act as a vehicular combat action shooter, almost kind of like a rail shooter in many ways, that sees you taking on the role of an armoured car, where you have the ability to fly and drive on the road, but you also have a distinctive array of weapons that you will need to use to defeat enemy opponents and reach end of level bosses that you can proceed throughout the many different routes that the game will give you access to as you play. If we look at the game in context, it takes a lot of inspiration from many other games that came before it. Not only does it have racing, it will kind of remind you, because the game was also developed by Taito, which were well known for these type of games. They were also responsible for the iconic Chase HQ and many other games like it, but it also takes elements from games you would have seen in the arcades made by Sega, with the likes of Thunderblade, Space Harrier, Outrun. So if you think of all of those type of games and you combine all of the intricate elements between the fast-paced racing gameplay and the combat shooting elements of all of those other games like Space Harrier and Thunderblade, you can definitely get a varying mix of what you can expect in Night Striker. So it is an interesting concept. The game would receive mixed reviews, however, with regards to critics, being heavily criticised mainly due to its graphics, but it was a period of its time. And again, with the console version, they were just ports of the arcade original in all respects to them. So going back to some of the elements that I previously mentioned, the game does give you access to various routes. There are a total of 21 stages in the game, and it plays out very like the choice route that you would see in the early Outrun games on the likes of the Sega Mega Drive, the arcade, Sega Master System and beyond. That at different intervals you would have a choice between going left and right, which would take you onto a completely different section of the game that could take you anywhere from forests to cities to caves to underwater elements, pretty much anywhere you could think of, industrial settings, and each variation of the track you'd be on would present a totally different variety of enemies in order to fend off against and defeat. So there's a lot of replay value in the game, but in saying that, the game is also extremely difficult, because again, you do have to contend with many different elements. You also have limited lives, so if you die and all of your lives are gone, it is pretty much game over. Very like the Outrun series, where if you run out of time, it will show you your progress up to the point or the routes that you took along the way, but then you'll have to play the game again in order to go through the process. So it will definitely take some time, patience, and take quite a few tries in order to really fully master the game. But there's so much replay value in it with the amount of stages that are available. There's so many routes that you can take, and then you can combine different routes to go to different places, and in each route you will end up fighting different level bosses that will mix up the combat elements of the game, so you'll need to have different strategies on how you'll approach each interaction. Like for its time, when we look back, I know like the game was heavily criticised for its visuals, but I don't think that was really the case. For its time, the graphics are actually very, very good. It plays very, very well, and even with the ports like on consoles, I couldn't fault it. Yes, it does take a bit of getting used to with regards to the controls and just getting to be aware of your surroundings, but the more time you put into it, especially if you've played games like Space Harrier and Outrun, which I did personally growing up because I owned a Sega Master System and I owned Space Harrier as one of my games, and I also played a lot of Outrun during that time period as well, with mates having likes of the Sega Mega Drive and so forth. So I was familiar with that type of concept, and I always enjoyed those type of games. Yes, they were extremely difficult, don't get me wrong. Space Harrier for me was one of the most difficult games I ever played on the Master System, but I still used to put a lot of time into it because I really liked it. So this game here is very reflective of that, because it combines all of those elements of all of those iconic games into one piece, if you will. It's an interesting title. Right, it won't be for everybody. Some people will like it, some people won't, but it's different. It's unique. Right, it didn't get the best reviews. Back then there was a lot of people that for some reason really did not like the game. I suppose they have the reasons behind it. I suppose it came at a time when things were changing. The transition was changing from 2D to 3D, and people were looking for more intricate elements with regards to the games that they were playing. domain. So this game tried to be a little bit of everything, but it just wouldn't have appealed to everybody pretty much. But it would appeal to a select few players. It is interesting, even looking back on it now, I enjoyed it. I thought it was difficult, yes, I'm not going to deny that, but it has some interesting features. I like the graphics of it. It does have an interesting soundtrack, plus it reminds me of a lot of games I grew up playing. That's what drew me into it, and that's what I found to be the best element of it, because I found the more I put into it, the more it reminded me of those games and the more I started to enjoy it. But it is tough, I am going to say that, it is a tough game, but there's a lot of replay value in it. If you do put a bit of time into it, you will get a lot out of it, and plus it's a rare game. Not many people would know that this game was even on the PlayStation, as it was, again, only released in Japan. So whatever my opinions on it, people's opinions will vary and differ, but I would love to know your thoughts of the game and what you think of it overall. Is this something that you would have played back in the day, and do you enjoy these type of old school shooters that would have been released on earlier systems, even in the arcades? So be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around other obscure and quirky games like this that were also released on the PlayStation way back in the day, then you can check out some of the other videos I have covered on the channel, and even some of the videos here on screen that will look at those games so that you can see them in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.